Hey guys, tonight we're heading out to the wide, misty plains of Xi'an. The air smells faintly of wet earth and diesel fumes from a distant tractor. You pull your jacket tighter, your breath a ghost in the morning chill. Somewhere under your sneakers, maybe 30 meters down, an emperor is still dreaming, surrounded by an army that hasn't moved in 2,000 years. You probably wouldn't last a day in the Qin Dynasty's army bronze armor, wooden spears, no Wi-Fi, but don't worry. Tonight you just have to watch and listen. The horizon is a soft line of gray. Fields stretch in every direction, dotted with persimmon trees and quiet farmhouses. It's hard to believe that this unassuming patch of Chinese countryside once guarded the heart of the most powerful empire on Earth. You shuffle closer to the rope barrier around the archaeological site. The soil is dark, almost metallic. Beneath it lies a sleeping formation. 8,000 life-sized clay warriors standing in battle order, frozen mid-command, each one modeled after a real soldier from the army of Qin Shi Huangdi, first emperor to unite China in 221 BCE. You can almost picture them through the ground, neat rows of terracotta feet, horses frozen mid-trot, generals staring into the endless dark. The silence feels dense, like sound itself doesn't dare go too deep. Somewhere in that hush, you sense the pulse of something enormous. Historians still argue whether the emperor meant these statues to guard him in the afterlife, or simply to prove he could control death itself. Either way, they've been doing their job flawlessly. A tour bus passes on the distant road, blaring faint pop music before fading away. You smirk. If any of those ancient soldiers could hear that, they'd probably think the apocalypse had arrived. You glance back toward the entrance of Pit 1, the largest excavation hall. Inside, bright spotlights wash over a sea of clay faces. The air smells faintly of dust and disinfectant, a museum's version of incense. Your footsteps echo as you step onto the walkway. The floor below is a checkerboard of excavated pits, each filled with soldiers. Some stand perfectly intact. Others lie in pieces, their torsos cracked open like hollow eggs. You lean over the rail. The figures are taller than you expected, some over 6 feet. Their hands curl around invisible weapons long since stolen or rotted away. You notice the details, the folds of fabric on their sleeves, the braids of their hair, even the faint impressions of mustaches, each one different. Archaeologists say no two warriors are alike. Some have wide noses, others sharp cheekbones. A few look bored. One seems slightly annoyed, as if being stuck underground for millennia wasn't in the job description. You can't help but wonder if the sculptors were sneaking in caricatures of their co-workers. A quirky tidbit: modern researchers actually found small signatures carved into a few figures, ancient quality control marks, proof that even 2,000 years ago, someone had to double-check your work. You take a deep breath and close your eyes for a moment. The hum of the air vents, the shuffle of visitors, the creak of wood beneath your shoes all fade. For a heartbeat, you feel the world narrow to just you and the earth below. You imagine time rewinding, lights blinking out, concrete walls crumbling, the field above smoothing flat again. The centuries peel away until it's just soil and clay and silence. Then, faintly, the scrape of chisels, the clang of bronze molds. You open your eyes. The thought lingers like a scent. Somewhere down there, thousands of craftsmen once worked by torchlight, sculpting expressions that outlived them. Historians still argue whether the artisans were celebrated specialists or enslaved laborers trapped in a lifelong commission. Either way, their fingerprints are still there, pressed into thighs, helmets, the folds of tunics. You can almost feel their exhaustion baked into the clay. A tour guide's voice drifts from another platform, low and rhythmic. When the first emperor died, his body was carried into the central chamber. It has never been opened. You imagine that moment, priests sealing the chamber, guards lighting the last torches, the heavy stone doors sliding shut forever. The soldiers must have gleamed then, freshly painted in vermilion, jade green, and cobalt blue. They weren't the dull brown you see now. They were vivid as a video game character on day one of release. Then oxygen touched the paint, and within minutes it curled and fell away like old wallpaper. You blink slowly, the image dissolving. The emperor, the priests, the workers all gone. Only the soldiers remain. Even their names are lost, but their faces persist. You feel a strange comfort in that. Human hands made them. Human time buried them. You, another human, have come to see them again. The circle closes. A security guard yawns near the exit. You check your watch, almost midnight. You're the last visitor still walking the platform. You look once more at the soldiers below. Their shadows merge, long and still, under the artificial light. You try to imagine their final order before the burial. Stand guard until I return. 2 millennia later, they still obey. You turn toward the exit. Outside, the cold air hits your face, clean and damp. The fields are quiet again. The dog is gone. The snack stall shuttered. You start down the gravel path toward the road, each step crunching softly. Somewhere behind you, under tons of soil, 8,000 soldiers stand ready, waiting, listening. Their long nap continues, and tonight you're part of the silence. You start to imagine the mind behind it all, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, whose name still sounds like a command. It's hard to think of him as a man. He feels more like a weather system, vast, unstoppable, and occasionally destructive. You picture him pacing the balcony of his palace 2,000 years ago, staring into the black hills of Xi'an. A servant waits, motionless, holding a lantern that flickers in the wind. The emperor's voice is low, deliberate. Build me an empire that does not die. You can almost hear the echo of those words rolling down the marble halls. He's in his 30s, barely halfway through a life already swollen with victories. He has unified the warring states, standardized weights, measures, and even writing the first time all of China speaks with one script. That's your mainstream fact for the night. Every road, every official document, every grain of rice counted by the same imperial system. Efficiency was his religion. Death, his enemy. The emperor's paranoia about mortality is legendary. You walk with him, metaphorically, through corridors lined with shimmering bronze mirrors, his reflection multiplied 100-fold. Historians still argue whether his obsession with immortality came from philosophy or plain fear. Maybe both. After all, he'd conquered everyone but time itself. So he starts collecting magicians and alchemists. The court fills with strange smells, mercury, sulfur, jade dust. You imagine a scene like a chaotic lab startup, scholars murmuring about elixirs, assistants sneezing over smoke, one guy definitely pretending to know chemistry. They feed him pills of eternal life made of mercury, which, ironically, speeds up his death. You grin softly. The man who built the longest empire accidentally poisoned himself trying to live forever. In your mind, the emperor sits at his desk under candlelight, fingering a small vial of silver liquid. It trembles when he breathes. Outside, the moon hangs low and pale. He orders his engineers to dig. If he cannot conquer time, he will command space. Beneath his palace, they start hollowing out chambers large enough to fit a city. Workers vanish for years into the dark. You picture thousands of torches flickering through tunnels that stretch for miles, the sound of shovels ringing like muted thunder. The Emperor rarely sleeps. When he does, his dreams are loud. You see him tossing on silk sheets, sweating under the weight of prophecy. He dreams of spirits rebelling, of ancestors demanding armies in the next world. A priest whispers that ghosts respect strength, not prayers. And so, the Emperor decides. He will bring his army with him into eternity. Not real men they might rot or rebel, but soldiers of clay. Perfect, obedient, silent. The idea hits him like lightning. He wants a mirror world underground, one where the sun never rises and no enemy ever wins. Orders fly, officials scatter like startled birds. Across the empire, craftsmen are conscripted. Farmers, potters, metal workers, tens of thousands march toward the capital to begin what will become the greatest construction project of the ancient world. You stand now on that same soil, but in your imagination it's centuries earlier. The ground trembles with footsteps, the air thick with dust and command. Overseers shout from scaffolds, slaves pull sledges loaded with wet clay, fires burn all night to bake the figures. The Emperor's architects map every corner, building a miniature empire underground palaces, rivers, mountains, even a dome painted with constellations. A small part of you wonders how it felt to be one of those workers. Did they feel awe or just exhaustion? Did they joke about the Emperor's vanity as they shaped his nose in clay? Historians still argue whether the artisans were killed afterward to preserve the tomb's secrets. You glance at a cracked statue's mouth and imagine it whispering something the moment before the kiln closed. You pause in your mental journey to notice the Emperor again. He stands at the edge of a massive pit, wind lifting his robe. Behind him, the terracotta army is forming rank by rank. He does not smile. His eyes are sharp as obsidian. He's not thinking about art. He's thinking about insurance, a defense policy for the afterlife. You imagine him muttering, "They'll say I feared death, but I am merely preparing for another campaign." The Emperor's ambition is so vast it bends logic. You think of how much human time is poured into this one dream. If a single statue took a week to mold, that's decades of labor. Even the horses have unique expressions. Their ears flick back, nostrils flared as if about to neigh. You feel a shiver. It's not eerie, it's humbling. Every inch of this project screams obsession, control, and a strange tenderness toward immortality. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some legends claim the Emperor also built mechanical traps, crossbows, rigged to fire at intruders who dared to open his tomb. You half smile. That's one way to discourage looters. Modern scans have found metallic signatures consistent with ancient weaponry, though no one's brave enough to test the theory. Imagine a poor intern being volunteered. Go ahead, open that. Go ahead. Open. As you breathe, the scene fades. The Empire is still young. The Emperor alive, his dream unstoppable. He believes the clay men will wake when he commands them again. He doesn't realize he's building not a bridge to eternity, but a time capsule. You picture him resting at last, convinced he's beaten the clock. The truth, though, is quieter. Time will bury him like dust. You start walking again in the present, hearing the hum of modern lights and the murmur of tourists outside. The emperor's paranoia lingers in the air, a ghost of ambition. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughs, chasing a pigeon near the entrance. The world has moved on, but the emperor still sleeps below, wrapped in bronze and mercury dreams. His clay army keeps watch, patient and precise. And tonight, you keep watch with them. The emperor's dream is now taking shape underground, and you descend into the world of the artisans who made it real. The year is somewhere around 210 BCE, but time feels strange here. The air smells of clay, smoke, and sweat. You stand at the edge of a vast cavern lit by oil lamps, their glow trembling against the packed earthen walls. All around you, men and women work in silence, broken only by the scrape of chisels and the rhythmic thump of mallets. You can feel heat radiating from the furnaces, hear the dull hiss of wet clay drying on wooden frames. This is where immortality gets built, one handful at a time. You move closer, stepping over coils of hemp rope and shards of discarded molds. At one table, a craftsman is shaping a soldier's face. His fingers are stained red-brown, and every touch is deliberate. The statue's cheekbones sharpen. A faint smirk takes form. It's oddly intimate-like watching someone invent a human from memory. The sculptor doesn't know his own name will vanish, but his clay soldiers will last forever. Each artisan specializes. Some carve armor plates, others roll fingers or braid terracotta hair. A few are tasked with attaching ear sears so distinctive that modern researchers can match them statistically to regional populations. That's your mainstream fact for this section. Genetic diversity in Qin's army shows up in clay. The emperor wanted a cross-section of his realm represented in his underground force. Soldiers from every conquered state reappear here, immortalized in ceramic unity. You walk between rows of unfinished heads, hundreds of them, staring blankly from wooden racks. They look like students waiting for their graduation photos. One of them even seems to be judging your posture. You give a mock salute and move on. A soft chuckle escapes you. It feels good to laugh down here. The noise grows louder near the kiln area. Huge dome furnaces roar, their vents spitting waves of heat that sting your cheeks. Workers feed bundles of straw and wood into the fires, keeping the temperature steady for days. You watch them pull out a finished leg, gleaming dark red, still steaming. Someone mutters a curse in Old Chinese. Another replies with a joke about the emperor's obsession. You can't understand the words, but the tone is timeless. Sarcasm survives every dynasty. Historians still argue whether these artisans worked voluntarily, as state employees, or under duress. Some records claim they were honored craftsmen. Others whisper they were prisoners of war. Either way, they shared the same endless task, shaping silence into soldiers. You glance at a half-finished horse, its mane curling in perfect ridges, nostrils flared as if breathing. You realize that in this place, art and labor are the same word. You move toward a side chamber where painters sit cross-legged with trays of pigment. The smell of mineral powder is sharp azurite for blue, cinnabar for red, malachite for green. A painter dips a brush, traces a line along a warrior's cheek, and the figure changes from statue to someone. The transformation is almost eerie. The bright colors shimmer under lamplight, so alive you half expect them to blink. The painter leans back, sighs, then jokes that nobody will see this after the tomb is sealed. You imagine him saying, "Maybe in 2,000 years someone will dig us up." Well, he wasn't wrong. One quirky tidbit you recall. Archaeologists discovered traces of lacquer under those pigments, a sticky base layer that preserved color brilliantly until it met oxygen. When modern scientists first uncovered the warriors, the colors vanished within minutes, like dreams exposed to daylight. Now labs race to find ways to refreeze time, sealing paint with polymers the moment it's exposed. It's poetic and tragic, technology trying to undo air itself. You notice how methodical the operation feels. Each figure has its own identity: infantry, archer, general. You pause near a general's head, crowned with a topknot and carved with faint lines of age. His expression is calm but commanding, like he's about to assign you extra push-ups. You smirk again and whisper, "At ease, sir." Your eyes drift upward. The workshop's wooden beams are blackened from smoke. Bits of straw and dust hang like cobwebs. Somewhere above, the emperor sleeps in his palace, unaware or perhaps uncaring of the cost of perfection. He wants an empire that outlasts his pulse. And here, among heat and hammering, you understand the paradox. To make something immortal, you have to exhaust the living. You pause to drink from an imaginary ladle of water that someone offers, lukewarm, earthy, tasting faintly of ash. A young apprentice laughs when you cough. He gestures toward a line of completed soldiers waiting to dry. Their stance is identical, their eyes forward, yet each mouth is different. One smiles just barely, another looks grim, another curious. You could stand here all night tracing personalities through baked mud. Historians still argue whether this level of individuality was deliberate artistry or mass production gone delightfully wrong. Maybe each sculptor couldn't help sneaking in a bit of themselves: a crooked nose, a thoughtful brow, a familiar smirk. Humanity leaking through an emperor's demand for perfection. You reach the far end of the workshop, where broken fragments pile high: arms, legs, torsos discarded for cracks or misfires. A supervisor inspects them, mutters something, then orders the pieces ground back into powder. Nothing wasted, not even mistakes. You run your fingers across a discarded hand, feel the ridges of fingerprints. Real hands, real prints, immortal echoes. Somewhere a bell rings. Work stops. The artisans kneel briefly as a messenger passes through, an imperial decree, sealed in red wax. The contents are unknown, but the workers exchange anxious looks. You sense change coming. Maybe a new order to expand the tomb, or maybe a warning that the emperor's health is failing. The sound of tools fades, replaced by the low rustle of fear. You step back slowly, letting the scene dissolve. The warmth fades, the voices thin to whispers, and you are back in the cool, modern air of the museum. The pit below you feels deeper now, almost infinite. The soldiers stand ready, each one carrying a spark of those who built them. You feel a strange comfort and a little guilt knowing they've been working longer than anyone in history. Your breath steadies. The rhythm of the past matches the beat of your heart. You think, maybe that's the real immortality, not the emperor's command, but the echo of a craftsman's fingerprint pressed into time. You follow the echo of hammering down into the darker layers of the tomb, where air grows thick and damp. The light around you softens, replaced by the flicker of torchlight on raw stone. Here lies what the chronicles called the palace below the earth. It isn't a tomb in the usual sense, it's a mirror of the empire itself. You can feel the weight of it pressing in from all sides, a city built for one man's eternity. You step through an imagined tunnel, whose ceiling arches low, the walls painted with constellations that shimmer under torchlight. The paint glows faintly, as if remembering its former brilliance. You can almost hear water, though no river runs here. According to Sima Xi'an, the Han Dynasty historian who wrote about this place centuries later, the emperor ordered rivers of mercury to flow through his underground realm. Historians still argue whether he meant it literally, but modern soil tests reveal elevated mercury levels around the chamber. So either the legend holds truth, or Xi'an simply got the worst environmental hazard in ancient history. You picture the mercury like molten mirrors gliding through carved canals, sunlight replaced by metal, eternity reflected in poison. The emperor's architects designed it so that every corner symbolized heaven and earth. The ceiling above the main chamber was inlaid with pearls for stars. The floor mapped the known world. You imagine walking across each step a continent, each breath an age. A faint breeze brushes your face. Maybe it's your imagination. Or maybe the tomb breathes. The sound feels alive. You pass by rows of bronze vessels sealed with wax. Inside, ancient wines have long evaporated into ghostly aromas. A scent like burnt honey and iron lingers in the air. You lean closer to a jar and catch a glint of something crystalline, salt crystals, maybe, or remnants of ceremonial offerings. You half joke to yourself, guess the afterlife had catering. Farther in, guards of clay flank the path. Some kneel, some stand with spears. Their stares follow you, unblinking. The flicker of light turns their shadows into movement. You know they can't shift, but part of you still expects one to nod in acknowledgement, as if to say, "Welcome, you're late." This chamber is said to contain unimaginable treasures, bronze chariots, jade jewelry, miniature palaces, and mechanical birds powered by springs. A quirky tidbit. Ancient texts mention self-moving devices designed to entertain the emperor in the afterlife. Some archaeologists believe they were early automata bronze contraptions that flapped or rolled when heated. You imagine little mechanical cranes clinking across marble floors, guardians that never quite worked right but looked impressive in a royal brochure. You slow your breathing, letting the silence fill your chest. The deeper you walk, the more it feels like you're inside the emperor's mind, methodical, brilliant, but uneasy. Each tunnel bends toward symmetry, each chamber balanced perfectly against another. The geometry feels obsessive, a kind of architectural meditation against mortality. You run your hand along a wall, cold and smooth. The stone hums faintly, as though it remembers being carved. Somewhere behind the sealed doors lies the emperor himself, surrounded by treasures untouched for over 2 millennia. Historians still argue whether opening his burial chamber would enlighten us or destroy what's left. Rumors persist that the tomb is booby-trapped with crossbows and collapsing floors. Maybe that's myth, maybe not. Either way, no one dares to find out. You whisper a thought toward the sealed chamber. You win, old man. We're still afraid of you. You picture his coffin resting amid rivers of mercury. Maybe he lies in a bronze sarcophagus, clutching the jade tablet that once bore his imperial seal. Maybe he's dust, dissolved into the same poison he believed would preserve him. Either way, his world remains closed. You stop near a stairway that descends even deeper. The air feels charged, metallic. Your tongue tastes faintly of copper. If this were truly mercury vapor, you'd want a hazmat suit. But it's just imagination tonight. You smile quietly at the absurdity of picturing yourself in a safety mask during an ancient haunting. A small pool reflects torchlight ahead, and you crouch beside it. The surface ripples gently, distorting your face into something unrecognizable. For a moment, you wonder if that's the point of this place, to erase the living, to turn everyone into a reflection. You drop a small pebble into the pool. The circles widen, touching the edges of the chamber, and for an instant the whole tomb seems to breathe again. You rise and keep walking. Statues line the corridor, musicians, dancers, animals of clay. A horse bows mid-step, frozen in grace. A dancer's sleeve curls like a wave. They were sculpted for eternity's banquet, a party that never started. You half whisper, "Worst event planning ever." The temperature drops slightly. Ahead, a chamber door looms, a massive stone slab etched with symbols of protection. You step closer, tracing the grooves with your fingertips. Some are smoothed by time, others sharp as if carved yesterday. It's strange, thousands of years gone, yet the craftsmanship feels recent, like the mason just went for lunch. You sense the sheer labor it took to make this underworld. Hundreds of thousands of tons of earth moved brick by brick. Whole hills were reshaped, villages displaced, rivers diverted. You realize you're walking through not just one man's tomb, but the Empire's final monument to its own endurance. The cost, both human and material, is staggering. You think of the artisans you met earlier, their laughter fading as they were sealed inside, if the rumors are true. You stop to rest, sitting on a cool stone ledge. The flickering light dances across the warriors' faces, and for a brief, odd moment it looks like they're breathing. You imagine one turning to you, whispering in a calm, dusty voice. He's still dreaming, you know, and maybe he is. The Emperor's dream stretches through time, his order still obeyed, his army still waiting, his tomb still sealed. You stand slowly, your footsteps echoing up the stairway. The deeper chambers recede behind you, but their silence follows, patient and endless. Back on the surface, the night air feels almost too light, too fast. The wind brushes your cheeks as if to remind you that the world still moves. You glance once more at the mound that hides the buried palace. Beneath it, mercury flows, or maybe just myth. Either way, the Emperor sleeps on, wrapped in darkness and ambition, untouched by centuries of sunrise. The night settles heavy over Xi'an as you linger by the low hills marking the Emperor's tomb. The breeze stirs the tall grass, making it sound like faint whispers from beneath. The torchlight of the imagined tomb fades behind you, replaced by the dim orange glow of your lantern. You can almost sense history shifting the mighty Qin Empire, which once stretched farther than the horizon, beginning to unravel. You imagine standing on these same fields just a few years after the Emperor's burial. The workers are gone, the pits sealed. The air smells of burnt timber and ash. What was once a site of ceaseless construction is now a scar of silence. Somewhere above ground, the new Emperor Wan of Qin Shi Huang's son sits, nervously on a cracked throne. His father's bronze statues glimmer around him, but the Empire's foundations are already shaking. You walk through that fading world. Roads that once carried imperial decrees now bear soldiers of rebellion. The same strict laws that unified the Empire start choking it. Taxes rise, punishments grow crueler, and famine begins to bite. You hear whispers in the dark. Farmers revolting, soldiers deserting, scholars burning their official seals and vanishing into the mountains. Historians still argue whether the Qin fell from tyranny, overreach, or just exhaustion. Maybe all three. In the imagined streets of the capital, smoke rises. The palace that once housed the first emperor glows like a dying star. You picture the artisans who built the terracotta warriors, hearing distant thunder not of storms, but of war drums. They must have known the end was near. Some say the mausoleum's secret location was betrayed. Others believe it was forgotten, swallowed by the very earth that guarded it. A flash of lightning, maybe in your imagination, illuminates rows of unfinished statues left outside the sealed tomb. Rain splashes against their clay faces, softening the edges, washing pigment away. They crumble quietly, returning to mud. A poetic symmetry. Clay to clay. You tread farther, seeing the Qin banners collapse in your mind's eye. A general named Xiang, fierce and unpredictable, storms the capital. His soldiers loot and torch the imperial palaces. Somewhere in the chaos, rumor says he opened part of the tomb complex, seeking treasure. Maybe he found a few chariots, maybe just smoke and mercury fumes. Historians still argue whether his army reached the central chamber, but the legend insists he set the outer buildings aflame. Fire devoured the emperor's palace, and the sky glowed red for 3 days. You pause, and imagine the moment the flames reached the underground vaults. The heat doesn't burn the clay soldiers, it seals them tighter, bakes their silence deeper. Ash rains from above, settling into cracks. Outside, the dynasty collapses. Inside, the emperor's army begins its long nap, undisturbed by history's noise. You kneel in the dirt, pressing your palm flat against the ground. It's cool, steady, patient. Beneath that calm lies 2 millennia of forgetting. Generations of farmers plowed these fields without ever knowing what slept below. Earthworms burrowed through the roof beams of ancient chambers. Roots twisted around helmets and spears. Rain and time pressed the tomb deeper until even memory gave up. A quirky tidbit. Local folklore long before 1974 spoke of ghost fires and iron dragons beneath the soil. Some villagers refused to dig wells here, fearing bad luck. Turns out their superstition was accurate geological mapping. You grin, sometimes myth knows more than measurement. You rise and look toward the horizon. The empire that dreamed of eternity lasted only 15 years after its founder's death. 15 years for something built to last forever. You can almost hear the echo of the emperor's voice turning to dust. His laws erased, his palaces burnt, his statues buried. And yet, his army endures. Maybe that's irony, or maybe it's karma with good pottery skills. The scene shifts in your mind again. Centuries roll past like waves. The Han dynasty rises. Trade silk with Rome. Falls. Tang poets write about moonlit rivers. Mongol riders thunder across the plains. Ming builders reinforce the Great Wall. Through it all, the mound of the emperor's tomb stays silent, grass growing thicker each year. You see farmers guiding oxen across the fields, unaware they're walking over bronze chariots and sleeping soldiers. The soil becomes a kind of blanket, soft, warm, merciful. It covers the empire's wounds, lets time breathe again. Beneath it, the warriors rest shoulder to shoulder, waiting for orders that never come. If eternity were a sound, it would be the slow settling of dirt over their helmets. You wonder what dreams might drift through the clay minds of those soldiers. Maybe they relive battles they never fought, or maybe they stand eternally at attention, blank and peaceful. The thought soothes you. The chaos of rebellion, the fires of empire all gone. Only the calm remains. As you walk back toward the modern road, the grass sways higher than your knees. The sky above Xi'an is moonless now, stars veiled in mist. A dog barks in the distance, and for a heartbeat, it echoes like a war horn. You stop, smile faintly, and whisper, "At ease, soldiers. You've earned the rest." Historians still argue whether time erases or preserves. Maybe both. The emperor's empire vanished, but his silence became immortal. You realize that's what history does best. It forgets loudly and remembers quietly. The night deepens, and you feel sleep tugging at the edges of your thoughts. The fields fade into shadow. Somewhere below, the Terracotta army continues its watch, unmoving, unbroken, utterly patient. The rebellion, the empire, even you all just passing noises above their eternal post. You take one last look over your shoulder, whisper a soft, "Good night," and the wind seems to bow in reply. The next morning in your imagination begins with something far more ordinary than an emperor or a rebellion, a farmer with a shovel. It's 1974, and the fields near Lintong are dry and cracked. The Cultural Revolution is winding down, though no one here thinks much about politics. The well's gone dry, and water is what matters. You see him clearly. An old jacket, rolled-up sleeves, and the focused patience of someone who's dug more holes than he can count. The shovel hits something solid. He frowns, assumes it's a rock, and digs harder. The sound shifts, a dull clunk instead of a scrape. He kneels, brushes away soil, and suddenly 2 eyes stare back. Clay eyes. He drops the shovel. For a heartbeat, there's only silence. Then he leans closer. The face is lifelike, bearded, calm, a soldier rising from sleep. He calls the others over, and soon a few villagers crowd around, whispering. Someone jokes that it's bad luck to disturb the dead. Someone else says it looks like a statue from a temple. They have no idea they've just unearthed one of the world's greatest archaeological finds. You stand beside them in the dry wind, watching as they dig carefully with their hands. Another head emerges, then a shoulder, then fragments of armor. The clay surface is smooth, cold, and heavier than expected. They call the local authorities, and by afternoon, men in uniforms arrive. The farmer shrugs. He just wanted water. A quirky tidbit. For years afterward, he signed photos of himself holding that first fragment. His name was Yang Jifa, and he later joked that the emperor owed him a well. Archaeologists swarm the site. They pitch tents, set up wooden scaffolds, bring in cameras and brushes. The world shifts. Overnight, a quiet field becomes a portal through time. You imagine the first night of excavation, flashlights flickering, workers whispering as they uncover a rank of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder. It must have felt like waking a city. You kneel beside one of them. His armor gleams faintly under the lanterns. Dust clings to his face like sleep. For a moment, you half expect him to exhale. Instead, a soft wind moves through the pit, stirring old scents of earth and age. One archaeologist wipes his brow and murmurs, "They're alive." Another laughs nervously. Let's hope not. Historians still argue about how much of the army remains undiscovered. So far, more than 8,000 figures have been found, but radar scans suggest more chambers stretching farther underground. Somewhere beyond the mapped pits might lie generals, acrobats, even entire command posts sculpted in clay. Yet most of it remains untouched, sealed by time and caution. You look around as the work intensifies. Technicians measure angles, photographers capture every inch, guards cordon off the area. Someone brushes a layer of dust from a warrior's cheek, revealing a faint streak of blue pigment. Another worker gasps as a fully intact horsehead appears, nostrils flared as if startled by the sudden light. You watch their faces, half awe, half disbelief. A strange calm fills the air. You realize this is the first sunrise these soldiers have seen in 2,000 years. Their clay skin glows softly in morning light, their features detailed enough to feel human. There's something gentle about it, this reunion between worlds. You walk slowly along the edge of the excavation pit. The layers of earth reveal history like pages peeled back. Near the top, modern trash bits of plastic, roots, stones. Below that, a band of compacted soil from Ming Dynasty floods. Deeper still, the fine red clay of the Qin era. You trace the line with your eyes and realize how thin the border between now and then really is. Just a few feet of dirt, just a few. Someone nearby finds a bronze spear, its blade, though tarnished, still sharp enough to cut skin. You murmur softly, "Don't test it." The archaeologist smiles at you, as if hearing your thought. He places it gently into a padded crate, labeling it Artifact 0273A. You wonder if Qin Shi Huang would laugh or rage to see his army catalogued like museum stock. A local journalist arrives to photograph the site. The first images go public within weeks. China is stunned, then the world. Headlines call it the Eighth Wonder. Museums send letters. Politicians visit. The humble well site turns into a global sensation. Yang Jifa's old shovel becomes an exhibit. You grin at the irony an emperor's immortality revived by a farmer's thirst. Historians still argue whether the discovery was fate or pure accident. But as you watch the archaeologists moving methodically between the rows, you feel something quieter than destiny respect. Every brushstroke feels like a prayer. The workers kneel, dusting each fragment with reverence, as though waking someone gently from a long sleep. The smell of earth thickens in your nostrils. The pit is cool, but sunlight creeps in from the open roof. It feels sacred, yet ordinary, a meeting of shovel and eternity. You think of how much of the ancient world is still hidden, waiting under layers of time and chance. Maybe every field holds its own story, just asleep. As the day wanes, the archaeologists pack up. Floodlights hum softly, casting golden halos across the statues. You linger a while longer, tracing the rhythm of shadows over their faces. Each expression is unique calm, stern, tired, proud. You find one soldier whose lips curl faintly upward. He looks like he knows the joke. You whisper, "You missed a lot while you were out." Above, the sky shifts from blue to lavender. The air carries the smell of rain and history. The field that once fed crops now feeds wonder. You look out across the excavation site one last time. Somewhere deep below, untouched chambers still hold their secrets. The emperor's dream is waking slowly, cautiously, one shovel at a time. And as you walk away under the fading light, you can't shake the feeling that the ground still hums faintly, like something ancient breathing again after too long a sleep. The farmer wanted a well. He found a world. You're still in the excavation pit, but it's quieter now. The tourist chatter has faded. The workers have gone for dinner. Only a few lamps remain, glowing dimly like fireflies caught in glass. The silence settles thick around you, like the air before a storm. This is the part of history most people never see waiting, the delicate patience between each brushstroke. You stand beside a group of archaeologists who move like surgeons. One leans forward, his breath slow, sweeping the tiniest speck of dust from a warrior's eyelid. Another carefully slides a wooden brace beneath a cracked torso. It's a strange ballet of science and reverence. One wrong move, and 2,000 years could crumble into dust. A whisper breaks the quiet. Someone points toward a patch of darker soil, a possible outline of another figure. They work in silence, heads bent, brushes circling like moth wings. Slowly, a hand emerges, then a shoulder, then a helmet. The archaeologist exhales shakily, as if afraid the breath itself might break it. You realize that down here, discovery is less like digging and more like listening. Historians still argue whether we should ever open the emperor's central tomb. The outer pits are magnificent, but the chamber at the core remains untouched. Some believe it holds priceless relics and inscriptions that could rewrite China's early history. Others warn that even a tiny disturbance could destroy what air and moisture have preserved for 2 millennia. You stand between both arguments, feeling their weight. Sometimes leaving something buried is the only way to let it live. You glance toward the sealed mound rising beyond the pit. It looms like a sleeping hill, patient and watchful. You can't help picturing Qin Shi Huang himself down there, surrounded by his mercury rivers and bronze chariots, dreaming of immortality while scientists above debate whether to wake him. The irony feels cosmic. An older archaeologist nearby chuckles softly. "You know," he says, "we're all guests here. The emperor built this place for himself. We just borrow it for research." You smile, appreciating the humility in his tone. His flashlight beam grazes a warrior's face, and the clay glows faintly like warm skin. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Each terracotta warrior once held a real bronze weapons ords, halberds, crossbow scrafted with a thin layer of chromium oxide. That coating kept them from rusting for over 2,000 years. Modern scientists thought it was advanced chemistry, but new studies show it was just good soil conditions and luck. You grin. Even genius emperors need help from dirt sometimes. You step closer to one of the standing soldiers, his armor lined with tiny plates, his hands outstretched where a weapon once rested. The fingertips are smooth, slightly worn by centuries of weight. You imagine being that clay man standing still, listening to the world above change from empire to empire. There's something peaceful in the thought, even enviable. A sudden gust drifts through the open roof. Dust swirls, and for a heartbeat, it feels like movement among the soldiers. Just a ripple of air, but your pulse jumps anyway. You laugh under your breath. "Relax," you whisper to yourself. "No one's clocking in for duty tonight." The archaeologists begin covering some of the exposed figures with protective fabric. The fabric looks like linen shrouds, but it's a scientific necessity, a shield against humidity. As they work, one of them hums a faint tune, maybe out of habit. The sound echoes off the clay faces like a lullaby. It feels right these warriors have been sleeping long enough to earn music. You walk the perimeter, tracing the rope barrier with your fingertips. Every few steps, you pass a small tag bearing a number. Each one marks a soldier cataloged and photographed, his story translated into data. The thought makes you oddly sad. You wonder if immortality still counts when it comes with an inventory code. Still, there's beauty in the precision. The archaeologists are caretakers of memory, not thieves. Each figure they reveal is a conversation resumed after 2,000 years of silence. You crouch beside one statue, its nose chipped, but its eyes unbroken. You whisper, "You're doing fine. Don't rush waking up." Historians still argue what exactly the army symbolizes. Was it military pride? Fear of death? A cosmic performance of control? Maybe all of the above. You consider that perhaps the emperor wanted what everyone wants, to be remembered, to matter, to not dissolve into anonymity. It's just that he had 700,000 people and infinite clay to prove the point. A soft sound draws your attention. It's the distant shuffle of a caretaker walking the upper deck. His footsteps echo softly, rhythmic and slow. You think of the artisans from centuries ago, same cadence, same silence, just different tools. The line between ancient and modern blurs. You notice an unfinished section at the far corner, partly excavated. Half a row of soldiers still lie half buried, their torsos emerging from the soil like sleepers rolling in their beds. You kneel beside one whose face is barely visible. The archaeologists will reach him in a few days, maybe weeks. For now, he rests, half in dream, half in air. You find yourself whispering, "Take your time. You've waited this long." The air down here feels different now, calmer, almost tender. The hum of machinery has stopped, replaced by the slow creak of cooling metal. You realize you've spent hours watching people uncover the past one brushstroke at a time. There's something profoundly human about it, the desire to meet the dead halfway, gently. You glance up through the opening in the roof. The night sky spills through, pale and infinite. For a fleeting second, you imagine the Emperor's spirit rising through that same gap, watching his army still standing guard. Maybe he'd be proud, or maybe he'd complain about the lighting. Hard to say with emperors. The lamps flicker once, twice, and then steady. You step back toward the walkway, your shoes crunching softly over loose grit. Each echo feels slower now, like the world itself is breathing in rhythm with the buried army. You pause, take a long breath, and smile faintly. You're not sure if you've been exploring history or dreaming it. But one truth stays with you. Everything the Emperor built to defy time now depends on strangers with brushes and gloves to survive. Immortality, it turns out, is a group project. You turn toward the exit, one last glance over your shoulder at the rows of soldiers under the soft yellow glow. They stand motionless, but their presence feels immense. You whisper, "Good night, generals," and the echo fades like dust settling. Morning creeps in through the high windows of the excavation hall, pale and misty. You're still here, watching the first beams of sunlight stretch across the Terracotta Soldiers' faces. For a second, it looks as if the entire army is waking. The light grazes the ridges of armor, catches on faint traces of color. A thin streak of blue across one figure's sleeve. A flicker of red beneath another's collar. You blink and it's gone. This is the tragedy and magic of the Terracotta Army's resurrection. The colors vanish the moment they breathe air again. You lean over the railing, watching a team of scientists crouch over one warrior's face, trying desperately to save the pigments from fading. It's a losing race against oxygen. They spray gentle mists of stabilizing solution, hover with tiny UV lamps, whisper instructions like surgeons in an ER, and still, flakes drift away like autumn leaves. Historians still argue about what the full army once looked like. Some say each warrior was painted in bold, comic book colors, turquoise armor, bright red sleeves, purple trousers. Others believe the hues were subtler, designed to glow softly in lamplight. Either way, the warriors weren't meant to be dusty statues. They were once as vivid as living soldiers, marching into eternity under a lacquered sky. A quirky tidbit, you recall. When the paint was first rediscovered in the 1970s, archaeologists would sometimes hear faint, popping sounds. That was the lacquer layer cracking as the air hit it, releasing trapped gases after 2,000 years. Imagine that in a size of time escaping like bubbles from champagne. The Emperor's last celebration, long delayed. You walk down the stairs toward the pit floor. Up close, the color fragments look fragile as butterfly wings. You crouch, studying a tiny patch of pink on a warrior's cheek. It's the last trace of human warmth baked into clay. You resist the instinct to reach out. One careless breath could erase it. You whisper instead, "You look good for your age." A conservator nearby chuckles quietly without looking up. Her hands move steadily, guided by magnifying glasses and muscle memory. She explains softly, "We're trying to save seconds that are already gone." You nod, understanding more than words. The soldiers outlasted empires, but not sunlight. The floor smells of damp soil and faint chemicals. Fans hum to keep the air stable. Machines monitor humidity levels like heartbeat monitors. The entire hall is both laboratory and shrine. You realize that this, too, is part of the Emperor's legacy 1,000 years later. He's still employing armies of specialists, only now they fight decay instead of rivals. You move carefully between the rows. Each soldier carries the ghost of color differently. One shows faint traces of green along the armor rivets. Another hides purple between folds of clay. Under the right light, their faded pigments look like bruises healing in slow motion. You think about how something so strong an empire, a king, a dream can crumble at the speed of air. Historians still argue whether it's worth uncovering more warriors if their colors can't be preserved. Some say we should wait for technology to catch up. Others say discovery itself honors them. You stand in the middle, undecided. The beauty of archaeology is also its cruelty. It can only preserve what it destroys. You watch one technician lift a shard with tweezers, turning it under a microscope. The monitor nearby shows magnified pigment grains, vivid, shimmering, impossibly small. A mixture of malachite and cinnabar, they say. Minerals older than any dynasty, once mined from far mountains. You wonder if the soldiers themselves would care, or if the color was always meant for the Emperor's eyes alone. The air grows drier as the sun climbs. You glance up at the translucent roof panels filtering the light. Even that light is filtered on purposes. Unshine is now an enemy. You think about how strange it is that the same warmth that nurtures life destroys the past. History, like skin, burns easily. You stop beside one soldier who's more colorful than the rest. His torso still gleams faintly red. The hem of his tunic glitters with what might be crushed quartz. His face bears traces of black along the eyebrows. He looks amused. You can't explain it, but the hint of color makes him more alive, more approachable. "Nice outfit," you whisper. You'd trend on TikTok. A breeze drifts through the open pit, and a faint cloud of dust rises. You cover your nose. The air tastes faintly metallic, like old coins and rainwater. You think about the Emperor's rivers of mercury, and how, even now, trace vapors might swirl invisibly through this same air. Immortality. Recycled molecule by molecule. A researcher walks past carrying sealed containers marked Pigment 204B. You follow her to a side lab built into the corner of the museum. Inside, glass cases hold samples of painted fragments, tiny squares of ancient color preserved in nitrogen. Blues, reds, green seek, labeled with chemical compositions like azurite, Cu3, CO3, 2, OH2. You stare at the labels, impressed and slightly overwhelmed. You mutter, "The Emperor really said, 'Make me eternal and make it fashion.'" She smiles faintly but doesn't look up. Her voice is soft. "It's strange, isn't it? The Emperor built everything to last forever. But what survives best are the colors that vanish. You nod. It's a paradox you can feel in your chest, a reminder that impermanence is the truest preservation. You step back into the main hall. The colors are almost gone now. The sunlight fades as clouds move in. You glance one last time at the rows of silent figures. Their armor looks pale again, uniform and ghostly. It's as if they've decided to retreat back into shadow, embarrassed by too much attention. You close your eyes. Behind your eyelids, you imagine them restored. Red armor, green straps, black boots, gold-tipped arrows. The air thick with lacquer and heat. The Emperor walks among them, nodding in approval. For a moment, you see the full spectacle, vibrant, breathing, ready for battle. Then it fades, replaced by dust and silence. The hum of dehumidifiers fills the air, soft and rhythmic, like a heartbeat under layers of earth. You feel your own breath slowing to match it. You realize you've stopped thinking about preservation or science. You're just standing among ghosts of color, letting their quiet presence calm you. When you finally turn to leave, you glance back one last time. The soldiers seem content, their faint colors barely visible but still there. Maybe they don't need to be perfect anymore. Maybe surviving, even half-faded, is enough. By the time you return that evening, the museum is closed. The floodlights have been dimmed to preserve energy, and the excavation hall lies under a deep blue hush. You slip inside quietly with one of the curators, who smiles knowingly. "Night is when they rest," she whispers. You nod, not sure whether she's joking. You make your way down the walkway again, but the energy feels different now. The army isn't just history anymore, it's become something else entirely. A brand, a symbol, a screensaver on millions of devices. The Emperor's silent soldiers have gone viral. You take out your phone, open the official app, and see the entire site rendered in photorealistic 3D. Every crack, every speck of dust, mapped by drones. You can rotate the view, zoom in on a single face, read metadata about pigment composition and kiln temperature. You look up from your screen to the real figures below. Unchanged. The contrast feels absurd, almost cosmic. 2 millennia of stillness competing with a glowing rectangle in your palm. Historians still argue whether technology cheapens or immortalizes. Some claim digitization gives history infinite life. Others say it flattens mystery into pixels. You stand between them again, thinking both are right. You scroll further. Someone's built an online gallery where users can customize warriors, new colors, added helmets, meme captions. A terracotta soldier wearing sunglasses and a speech bubble that says, "Still waiting for my paycheck." You chuckle softly despite yourself. The curator beside you smiles. "At least they're being remembered," she says. She gestures toward a wall where holographic projections shimmer to life, rows of warriors recreated in their full color. Reds, greens, blues, gleaming bronze weapons. The lights pulse softly, and for an instant it feels like the past itself breathing through circuits. You walk through the holographic display. The floor under your feet vibrates faintly with bass from a hidden subwoofer. Artificial fog drifts around your ankles, cool and ghost-like. You can almost forget these aren't real soldiers. The projection algorithms make them shift slightly. Eyes blinking, hands flexing. The illusion is strangely comforting. You think, maybe immortality just needed better software. A quirky tidbit you recall. A few years ago, a team in Germany used laser scanning to map every known terracotta warrior down to 1/10 of a millimeter. The dataset was so massive it required its own dedicated server cluster project. Eternity, they called it. You grin. Even the name sounds like something the emperor would approve of. Outside, rain begins tapping against the roof. The rhythmic sound mingles with the hum of cooling fans. You rest your elbows on the railing and watch droplets streak across the glass above the pit. For a brief moment, it feels like the whole hall is underwater, like you're standing inside one of the emperor's mythical Mercury rivers. Somewhere behind you, a group of students whispers in excitement they're part of a VR project mapping the tomb's underground layout. On their screens, the soldiers march through a simulated underworld, their armor glowing faintly blue. You glance over one student's shoulder and see your own silhouette reflected in the headset lenses. You look like a ghost, in the reflection, a visitor from another time. Historians still argue whether the emperor would have liked all this attention. You imagine him frowning at the selfie sticks, confused by people wearing his soldiers on t-shirts. But then you think, maybe he'd be satisfied. His obsession with legacy has outlasted every rival. He wanted eternity. He got it'll be it through Wi-Fi. You wander into the museum's back gallery. Here, replicas line the walls, polished, perfect, mass-produced. Some are for sale. You run your hand along one. The clay is smooth, the lines sharp, but it feels hollow. Made in Xi'an, 2025, the tag reads. A souvenir of a miracle. You think about how strange it is that something built for divine immortality now comes with a QR code and a price tag. Price. Still, there's something beautiful about it. These copies keep the story moving. Somewhere in another country, a child will look at a miniature warrior on a shelf and wonder what it guarded. That curiosity that sparks the emperor's true afterlife. A projector hums to life, displaying archival footage from the 1970s excavation. You watch grainy black and white clips. Archaeologists in canvas hats, dust swirling around their ankles, the first faces rising from the dirt. The narrator's voice crackles in Old Mandarin. You don't need translation. The tone is enough excitement mixed with disbelief. You imagine how surreal it must have felt to dig up a civilization perfectly posed. The footage shifts to a more recent scene, drones sweeping over the complex, capturing aerial footage of the sprawling pits. You see yourself reflected faintly in the screen. Two timelines overlapping, one human, one digital. The thought humbles you. You take a seat on a nearby bench. The room glows blue from the monitors. For a long minute, you just listen to the rain outside, steady and soft. You realize the Emperor's army has finally achieved what it was built for. Not conquest, not protection, but presence. It stands as proof that time can be both cruel and kind, erasing color, but leaving form. The curator returns, holding a tablet showing the latest thermal scans of the unopened tomb. Swirls of red and yellow pulse like a heartbeat. Still alive in there, she says quietly. You nod. Alive might be the wrong word, but it feels right somehow. You glance once more at the holographic soldiers. Their artificial colors flicker, fade, and vanish as the projection shuts down. In the sudden darkness, the silence feels absolute. The only light comes from the faint glow of your phone screen, still showing one warrior's digital face. You lock it, pocket it, and whisper to the dark, back to sleep. As you step outside, the rain eases. The scent of wet earth rises again, the same smell from 2,000 years ago. The night air is cool, and the mound of the Emperor's tomb looms quiet in the distance. The screens may have powered down, but beneath that hill, the clay army remains unchanged, patient, loyal, enduring. You smile faintly. The Emperor wanted to live forever. Maybe he did, just not in the way he planned. You leave the museum well after closing, the path lit only by a few tired lamps flickering against the mist. The night is colder now, and the air carries that same quiet scent of clay and rain. The fields of Lintong stretch ahead flat, endless, and still. Somewhere under your feet, the Emperor's army waits exactly where it has always been. You follow the gravel trail until it fades into grass, and the mound of the Emperor's tomb rises ahead, a perfect silhouette against the night sky. No fences here, just quiet earth and crickets. The moonlight glances off the dew, turning the field silver. You sit down cross-legged, close enough to feel the slight warmth radiating from the soil. It feels alive. You whisper, "You're still here, aren't you?" In the dark, you can almost see them. The rows of soldiers beneath you, motionless, shoulder to shoulder, helmets glinting faintly in eternal night. A horse tosses its head, though maybe that's your imagination. It's easy to believe that deep below, the army is not sleeping, but listening. You slow your breathing until it matches the rhythm of the night. Historians still argue what Qin Shi Huang truly wanted when he built this silent empire underground. Some say it was fear, his desperate attempt to outwit mortality. Others think it was a gesture of faith, a way to carry his order into the next world. You look up at the stars, dim and trembling, and think, maybe it was neither. Maybe he just wanted to rest and still be remembered. The grass whispers as the wind turns. You imagine standing here in 210 BCE, the night before the tomb was sealed. Torches blaze, banners snap, the air heavy with incense and secrecy. You see workers lowering the last statues, their faces hidden by cloth. The Emperor's coffin disappears behind stone doors. Then darkness, silence. The long nap begins. The empire outside will vanish, dynasties will rise and fall, but beneath the soil, nothing changes. The warriors hold their lines century after century, patient beyond comprehension. You think of the artisans' fingerprints baked into their palms. You think of the pigments that once glowed like fire. You think of the farmer's shovel breaking the spell after 2,000 years. It all feels like one long breath-inhale at creation, exhale at discovery. A quirky detail flickers across your mind. Scientists once recorded micro-vibrations in the soil above the tomb, caused by wind, footsteps, and distant trains. Each tremor ripples through the chambers below like a faint heartbeat. You wonder if the Emperor can feel it modern life, brushing gently against his eternal dream. You lie back in the grass. The mound looms above, patient and immovable. Around you, the world hums quietly, distant engines, a barking dog, a soft drizzle starting again. Every sound folds into one steady lullaby. You realize the soldiers have been listening to this same earth song for 2 millennia. No commands, no battles, just weather and time. Historians still argue whether the tomb should ever be opened. Some believe the technology to preserve it is still centuries away. Others call it humanity's duty to uncover what was hidden. You find yourself hoping they wait. The mystery feels kind, protective. Some dreams shouldn't be disturbed. The drizzle turns to rain. You close your eyes. The drops patter softly on your jacket, then merge into a steady rhythm. You picture the clay soldiers below, the same rhythm echoing faintly off their armor. For a fleeting second, you can almost hear them breathing in unison, thousands of slow, patient breaths blending with the rain. You smile to yourself. The Emperor wanted eternity, and somehow he got it not through mercury or monuments, but through the quiet persistence of human curiosity. His army stands, not for war, but for wonder. You exhale slowly, and whisper, "Rest easy, all of you." The rain softens again, the air cooling, the world folding gently into silence. You let the sound carry you. It feels less like an ending and more like sinking into shared sleep with the Emperor, with his soldiers, with time itself.